Hi, greetings. It's me, Dr. Paul Gerhardt. And today I'm going to talk about managing cultural differences. In every industry in all parts of the world, we have people of different cultures that are at odds with each other. I mean, think about domestically here in the United States. There were gang wars, black against white, Mexican against African Americans, and even Native Americans versus, the government. Or in the workplace, we have managers against employees. And we have a habit of creating a culture around subgroups and groups of many types. And when we see things differently, sometimes we can get our egos involved, and we have to be able to fight for what we feel is right. And when both parties are putting so much effort into it because they both feel like they're right, usually it ends up where people just tolerate each other. Think about the words, we tolerate each other. And I can remember when we were doing diversity training years ago, and we used to teach, and some trainers still do, well, we've got to learn to be tolerant of each other. That means you have to put up with people being different. And to me, that just sounds so disrespectful. And I know that it's pie in the sky to think that we're always going to get along. But the most successful leaders really know how to navigate conflict in a way that really gets down to the root of things, where people feel like they're truly being respected. And I think that's really the key here. When you have two cultures that are clashing, whether it be butchers and bakers, or managers versus unions, there's belief systems behind it, and getting down to the nitty-gritty and really finding commonalities that are in place. Let's take unions for instance. If unions are in place ideally to help employees' voices be heard, and making sure that decision makers are doing the right thing for the right reasons. Disciplinary action is taking place in a respectful way, and in a way that makes corrective action for the benefit of both parties. And ideally, when an employee has made a mistake, he or she should own the mistake and do what it takes to correct it, because losing that employee is very expensive. It'd be better to try to save the employee, help the employee feel like he or she is generally respected, and then empowered to make good decisions on behalf of the organization. And then again, the manager needs to take responsibility for what his or her actions are, because sometimes people sabotage their jobs because they have felt disrespected, or they felt like what they do doesn't matter, or they had a misunderstanding of what expectations happen. And disciplining someone because they didn't really understand what was expected, that really isn't fair. And granted, every employee needs to take responsibility for making mistakes when they need to happen too. But if you can save an employee after the training that's taken place, you've saved the company good money, and you can chalk that up to a learning lesson that's even better, because that employee can help other people, through the experiences and wisdom gained from the challenges. Isn't that what we do in life? Not everything happens the way that we think it should. And as humans, when we haven't experienced something before, we're going to have a tendency to make mistakes. It's part of being human. So as leaders, we need to be understanding that most people aren't intentionally trying to create disorganization or chaos. They may be. And I know in warring civilizations, there's these deep philosophies about what is right and what is wrong, and people are being trained to learn to despise people who see things differently than them. And they feel so strongly, and they've got documentation from their holy books that show how they're right and other people are wrong. But at the very core, we people are people. We all put our pants on one leg at a time. We all have children and families that we come from that, for the most part, we love. And those are the common factors that could help unite people. I can remember when the Cold War was going on, and we were trained as Americans to not like the Russians, and they were supposed to have the women had big, thick, ugly mustaches, and we were trained that they told that they abused their children, and this is why we should hate them. And then the Cold War ended. And we found that the Russian people were just beautiful, amazing, talented people just like us. And, it makes so much sense. I mean, we saw Nadia Comaneci, amaze us in the U.S. Olympics. And we found their artwork and buildings to be absolutely incredible. So it really takes a breaking down of barriers and focusing on the commonalities to help manage differences. You're not going to be opposed to everything, chances are. Usually there's these commonalities. I think about, in union situations, for instance. I worked in the grocery industry for years, and management would always fight to try to lower wages for employees and lower benefits, and their costs really mattered. And of course, managers are accountable for profits. If companies don't make profits, then they can't be in business. And unions really are responsible for making sure that employees understand what's expected of them, and they help encourage them and train them to make sure that they really are the best employees and worthy of receiving the high wages that the employees have to offer. And they also need to be accountable, from my perspective, of making sure that the companies can stay profitable so that the organizations can stick around. I know here in Washington State, one of our biggest employers is the Boeing Corporation. And if Boeing decided to move because they could no longer afford to do business here, I hear 1 out of every 4 people in Washington State would be affected in one way or another, because there's a lot of subcontracting companies that are associated with the Boeing Corporation. So employers need to work closely with employees, to help create a culture of inclusiveness, not two cultures of this is us versus you. And that's, of course, pie in the sky. But really focusing on the commonalities. If go back to the grocery industry, if people were really clear on a single vision, I'm doing my job to satisfy our customers. From a manager's perspective, when my employees are happy and have a clear understanding of what's expected of them, proper resources to help deliver what's expected of them, and support and praise when they do good work, my employees are going to feel like they are in a culture of a positive change and momentum. From an employee's perspective, when they are feeling like they understand how what they do makes a positive difference in the overall vision of the organization, then they may tend to work a little bit harder to accomplish the organizational goals. But they have to understand how their work is making a positive difference. And so a culture of productivity and creativity is reinforced when a leader recognizes the excellent work they're doing. Jimmy, thank you so much for walking Mrs. Smith out to the car and helping her put the groceries in the back seat. I saw the way that you treated her almost as if she was your own mom, and that's the kind of work that will help make sure our store stays strong and our customers don't look to go other places because we treat them like family. Thank you, Jimmy. I appreciate that. Keep doing that. You know, those those types of praise help shape the culture of the organization. You know, and culture and climate go hand in hand. Leaders set the tone which influences the climate of the workplace. And if they're constantly focusing on the good things that are taking place because they have a single vision of what they're all about and helping people understand what they're accomplishing and they're empowering people and really listening to people when they don't have what they need, people stop becoming whiners and they start becoming solution providers. But that takes responsibility on the employee too. The employee shouldn't just go to the manager with a problem. They should also have a solution in mind. And see, that helps create a culture of collaboration. So organizations can do something very similar too. You know, they have to focus on who their key clients are, and they can't be all things to everybody. But they do need to recognize the cultures that are in place and focus on the similarities that may exist in values, and somehow be able to focus on what they can influence and not focus so much on what they can't. And when there are differences at hand, it may take really bringing the other party into the room and allowing conversations to take place to really listen to how to create a win-win situation. You know, in Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, one of my favorite books for leaders and one of the best-selling books of all time, written by the 20th century most influential man of the year, Dr. Stephen Covey, you know, he talks about win-win and no deal being the last result. And so sometimes you have to agree to disagree. But if you stay in the conversation longer and really listen first to understand what's important here, why are people arguing? Sometimes it's about ego state, and really, if you have two egos involved, there's conflict. But if you have only one person bringing ego involved, the other person cannot bring his or her ego into it, and they can have more influence on being able to affect the conversation to help the other person see that they are truly being heard and they are truly being valued. And the leader must want to help shape the organization to change the culture so that there can be more melting of the blending of the cultures together. But that takes effort, and that takes time, and that takes concentration on focusing on what's most important. And the other culture needs to see that they are most important. I like to think about, you know, relationships. You know, relationships are fragile, and trust is the glue of that. And so you build trust by giving trust. And then when you're tested with trust, don't violate that trust. You know, it's a fragile process, but if you're consistently being tested and you're consistently passing the tests, the bonds of trust become stronger and stronger, and that's when you can change the culture. But you have to be authentic, and you can't ever do anything to violate that trust. And as we continue to talk about, listening truly is key. Thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. This is Dr. Paul Gerhardt. Have a great day, because you get to choose how you feel about it.